Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back, and we got a few Q posts to go through today. We're going to get started on them right quick. So grab that coffee, fist bump your neighbor, and let's go. Okay, so first things first, Patrick, where have you been? Well, I've been working my butt off trying to get a video out to you, and I still am. I probably need a couple more days of research to get it out to you, but I really think you're going to like some of the connections that I am coming across. So we're going to kind of cruise through these Q posts today because I promise you there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff to come. We're on 3896, 13 minutes after the hour is 6. Q is pointing us to this document here, and this is from the American Society for Microbiology, or at least they have the copyright here, and this is from October 2007. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus as an emerging and re-emerging infection. Okay, so they were talking about corona back in 2007. Now, this section right here says, should we be ready for the reemergence of SARS? And then the highlighted part right here says the presence of a large reservoir of SARS-CoV-like viruses in horseshoe bats, together with the culture of eating exotic mammals in southern China, is a time bomb. Okay. So this was originally kind of how this all got started, right? Or at least that was the talk, was that this was coming from the consuming of bats. And it is done like that, and of course that kind of thing can really happen. If you've ever been to China, you'll know that they do eat a ton of things. In the big cities, they don't necessarily do that, but in some of the more rural areas, it can be a lot more common. And it looks like they knew about this for quite some time. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about this in my other video, but what Q is pointing out here is that they've known about this. They've known about the eating exotic mammals, you know, kind of a dangerous habit, right? And that they've been warning about this for quite some time. Of course, the media is getting on President Trump, being really, really offended that they're calling it this Chinese virus. What do you call it, a Chinese virus? Because it's from China. Anyway, they're perfectly happy to call it a Trump virus. But this is what Q is calling it too, the China virus. Worth remembering. And it takes you to a video from the Hudson Institute, and I want to show you a little bit of it. I actually want to start you at 1813, considering that would have been the timestamp where, oddly enough, Mike Pence sums it up.
Beijing is also impacting some nations' politics by providing direct support to parties and candidates who promise to accommodate China's strategic objectives. Since last year alone, Chinese Communist Party has convinced 3 Latin American nations to sever ties with Taipei and recognize Beijing. These actions threaten the stability of the Taiwan Strait, and the United States of America condemns these actions. And while our administration will continue to respect our One China policy, as reflected in the 3 joint communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act, America will always believe that Taiwan's embrace of democracy shows a better path for all the Chinese people.
Okay, so Mike, making some sense, Pence is talking about some politicians and actors that are basically selling out to China, giving it all away, right? And then he mentions Taiwan. And I'm not going to go way into Taiwan right now, but it is a really crucial territory, both strategically for the military, but for the rest of the world, because they are an outlet. They're trying to exercise their democracy, and they're an outlet to the rest of the world to kind of shed light as to what's really going on in China. That, of course, threatens China. They would love to shut it down. Now, if you followed me on Twitter for quite some time, you'll know that I have constantly badgered people about not just the Taiwan Strait really, but more in particularly the Spratly Islands as to why that is such a particular area. I've constantly said keep an eye on this area. And indeed, if things get hot, that's going to be an area that China is probably going to want to seize. That really puts a big threat on the rest of Southeast Asia, which is why I think that's such a particular area of focus for them. But I don't want to go way into that. Really what Pence was saying right there was throwing out there that the fact of the matter is that China has been sending their own for quite a long time. We've really done an exchange with China for quite some time, and it's really starting to come back and bite us. Now Q is talking about the Wuhan got you all in check Institute of Virology. Where's their geolocation? First biosafety level 4 lab was in 2015, so they've been preparing for a couple of years. City, province, origin, hot zone, geolocation. Well, thanks to Lisa Mae Crowley on Twitter, who shows you right here. You can see on the Googlies, Wuhan Institute of Virology right there, and Wuhan Institute of Technology. They're only 16 minutes away, 9.1 kilometers. I'm sure that's probably just a coincidence. And then this next link takes you to a document from January 28th from justice.gov. We actually covered this when it came out. This was in regards to this Harvard University professor, Dr. Charles Lieber, Yang Tianjie, who is a Chinese national, and Zhao Zhang, who is also a Chinese national. They were all arrested, and I want to focus mostly on Zhang, who was attempting to smuggle 21 vials of biological research to China. That sounds like what Mike Pence was talking about. And of course, Dr. Charles Lieber up here was arrested this morning and charged by criminal complaint with one count of making a materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement. Okay, so this was all part of this China 1,000 Talents Plan, kind of one of these exchange programs. And that was a big part of what Mike Pence was talking about. And as we can see, this has really come back to bite us. But Q is letting us know that they've been on this for quite some time. Now, here's the part that Q focuses on. Unbeknownst to Harvard University, beginning in 2011, Lieber became a strategic scientist at Wuhan University of Technology in China and was a contractual participant in China's 1,000 Talents Plan from in or about 2012 to 2017. Okay, so this has been going on for quite a while, and we've covered a lot of this on my channel. We've talked about some of these Chinese nationals that were arrested last year in Iowa. They were also sending these this GMO corn samples back to China. They've been playing with our intellectual property for quite some time. And if you'll also remember when President Trump really was kind of new in his presidency and everybody was starting to really fire up the narrative of Russian collusion, he was the one that was really tweeting about IP. And I think that this is what he was talking about. Now, we get another link here. Q says rapid spread in brackets, which I'm hoping means we're going to kill the rapid spread. The article takes you to the Epoch Times from the 22nd. 21 million fewer cell phone users in China may suggest a high CCP virus death toll. The number of Chinese cell phone users dropped by 21 million in the past 3 months, Beijing authorities announced on March 19. Deaths due to CCP virus may have contributed to the high number of account closings. Okay. Cell phones are an indispensable part of life in China. The digitization level is very high in China. People can't survive without a cell phone. Tang Jingwan, a U.S.-based China affairs commentator, told the Epoch Times on March 21st, dealing with the government for pensions and social security, buying train tickets, shopping. No matter what people want to do, they are required to use cell phones. Okay, I want to stop right there because this is very interesting. So lots of people in China are using their cell phones less. Why is that? 21 million fewer. They're saying that it could suggest that there's going to be a higher death toll of that. Well, it sounds like they're trying to sell us on the use of the cell phone. Let's check this out. The Chinese regime requires all Chinese to use their cell phones to generate a health code. Oh, I see. So the Chinese regime wants the Chinese to turn on their cell phones, but it sounds like the Chinese aren't listening. Only with a green health code are Chinese allowed to move in China now. It's impossible for a person to cancel his cell phone. China introduced mandatory facial scans on December 1st, 2019 to confirm the identity of the person who registered the phone. Well, that starts to make a little bit more sense, right? As early as September 1st, 2010, China required all cell phone users to register phones with their real identification system by which the state can control people's speech via its large-scale monitoring system. Okay, so I think you're seeing what we're talking about here, right? Now, let me take you just another paragraph forward. Beijing first launched cell phone-based health codes on March 10th. All people in China must install a cell phone app and register their personal health information. Then the app can generate a QR code, which appears in 3 colors to classify the user's health level. Red means the person has an infectious disease. Yellow means the person might have one. And green means the person doesn't. Okay, well, that gives us a whole new meaning from red to green, right? And it looks like the Chinese state wants they're demanding that their citizens actually install these apps and basically do all the things that keep them on this electronic leash. And of course, the red, yellow, green can be assigned to anyone depending on how sick they are or how much the state just wants to assume that they're sick, if you know what I mean, right? And it looks like Chinese citizens are fighting back by simply turning the cell phones off. They're trying to evade this whole network. Now, we've talked at great length about how not only China, but we've seen this all over now with this constant 5G rollout, seems to be trying to keep tabs on all kinds of people. And it looks like the Chinese are fighting back here. We also know that the Chinese state has been grabbing people off the street and just kind of basically abducting them, which is, of course, very, very dystopian and very, very disturbing. And Mike Pence was talking about this very thing too. Check it out.
Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. What they call the Great Firewall of China likewise grows higher, drastically restricting the free flow of information to the Chinese people. And by 2020, China's rulers aim to implement an Orwellian system premised on controlling virtually every facet of human life, the so-called social credit score. In the words of that program's official blueprint, it will allow the trustworthy to roam everywhere under heaven while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
Okay, so there you go. And I actually talked about this in a recent video as well. I'm afraid I don't remember which one it was, but it was just a few weeks ago. We were talking about how the Pope allowed this to happen. Now, I want to stop right here real quick because I get a lot of email from time to time saying, hey, Patrick, please don't hate on the Catholic Church. I am not hating on the Catholic Church. I don't have any hate for anybody. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm kind of looking out for the Catholic Church by pointing this out, but I am not going to shirk away from the fact that this was directly because of the Pope. He allowed this to happen, and this resulted in terrible things for the Catholic Church. So essentially, China got the ability to appoint their own bishops and their own cardinals and their own who knows what out there, and that resulted in a whole lot of excommunications, and it happened immediately. We talked about it in, like I said, one of my recent videos. But the point is that this is systematically now destroying not just the Catholic Church, but the Christians and the Muslims out there and the Buddhists out there, surprisingly enough, are all going to be persecuted. And that's, of course, what Mike Pence was talking talking about. So please understand, I'm not hating on anybody. I'm just calling a spade a spade. The Pope was involved with this. Whether you like him, whether you don't, the Pope was involved with this decision-making process. But let's talk about how this affects us over here in the United States. And POTUS rallies. Yeah, well, with everybody staying home, we can't have those massive rallies that are gaining so much steam that everybody likes to have, that we'd have every few days or whatever, and get everybody pumped up. And, of course, keep that train rolling. That's all since stopped, right? And POTUS econ gains. Yeah, of course, the market has taken a tank. And President Trump keeps predicting not only a bounce back, but really a massive bounce back, and it wouldn't surprise me. And POTUS unemployment gains, and POTUS A, B, C, D. You understand what's going on here, right? They're just essentially trying to put a roadblock onto POTUS's steam because they ain't got no game anymore. Weekend prior to POTUS election, well, we know that they've trotted out a bunch of morons, and essentially we are left between now Biden and Sanders. Neither one of them are real big winners, right? And I think that they know that too. They know very well. Delay U.S.-China trade negotiations. Yeah, everything that was gaining steam now has ground to a halt because of coronavirus. And Q says China prefers Biden plus VP as P. And I think that's the real idea. So whether Biden chose HRC as vice president, I would imagine whoever becomes the vice presidential candidate will be the one to really keep your eye on as far as the Biden race, because I think we all know that Biden is a lame duck, and I think China knows that too. So whoever is going to be sitting in that role is likely going to be somebody who wields some power and probably some influence with China. Shelter Biden public appearances, shelter Biden debates. Yeah, while Biden goes and does his thing and does his little gaffes, and you can goof at him and you can laugh at him or whatever, chances are the real strings are going to be pulled in the vice president position. Now, we don't know exactly how that's going to shake out yet, but I think most of you already see that coming as well. Let's move a little bit further here. Push new revised presidential 2020 vote by mail unsecure. And then we get this link here to Tom Fitton and his status. And it's actually a video that he links from a while back, just not too long ago, March 10th, it looks like. Voter fraud is a key civil rights issue. Who stands for voters who have their votes stolen? How many stolen votes is too many? And of course, the current tweet here says, warning, leftists use pretext of coronavirus outbreak to push unsecure vote by mail, free for all, no voter ID anywhere for 2020 elections. Precisely. Along with everybody staying home and basically derailing POTUS's momentum. Now they want to push this vote by mail thing. We're all going to be stuck at home, so we need to be able to exercise our democracy. We got to mail in our votes. And of course, when you mail in your votes, someone's got to receive that mail and alter that mail and mess with that mail and allow illegals to vote, which is what the video is about that I'm not going to show you. But that's precisely what they're trying to do. They're trying to muddy the waters again and, remove any kind of accountability for this because they know they can't win. Now, the next link takes you to the Twitter of Senator Tom Cotton, who makes some really interesting points. The first tweet here says, families and businesses need help now to survive the China virus pandemic. But Speaker Pelosi walked away from negotiations to write her own bill. Why did she do that? Full of absurd provisions, completely unrelated to the crisis at hand. Here's what Speaker Pelosi is demanding while Americans suffer. Number one, corporate pay statistics by race and race statistics for all corporate boards at companies receiving assistance. Bailing out all current debt of Postal Service. Required early voting. Required same-day voter registration, $10K bailout for student loans. For companies accepting assistance, 1/3 of board members must be chosen by workers. 7, provisions on official time for union collective bargaining. 8, full offset of airline emissions by 2025. What? 9, greenhouse gas statistics for individual flights. What does this have to do with anything? 10, retirement plans for community newspaper employees. 11, $15 minimum wage at companies receiving assistance. 12, permanent paid leave at companies receiving assistance. The Democrats see an opportunity in this crisis not to help the American people, but to hold an emergency relief bill hostage until they get their radical wish list. And I seem to remember seeing some funding in there for Planned Parenthood. So you see what's happening happening here. They are wanting to put lipstick on a pig and stick you with the bill for all of that pork fat. And they're going to try and do it under the guise of this whole coronavirus. Q says, what is the mathematical probability this occurs? The time bomb explodes at the exact point in time that allows for maximum damage above prior to the POTUS election. Well, I think you guys understand this is just another one of their panic buttons, right? Outside of standard deviation, of course. Who benefits the most? Mueller failed, impeachment failed. Why was it critically important impeachment be rushed into the House? Because they wanted to try and get it through before you had a chance to think about it. Because once you thought about it, you'd see that there was nothing there. MSM, Democratic Party, Hollywood narratives failed. The coup failed. Yeah, Hollywood's going nuts. And I will make a video on some of this Hollywood stuff. So understand that I am compiling some of that. It's going to take me a while to finish the other video that I'm talking about, and then I'm going to kind of go into some of that. But as you can see, all these guys are melting down. Everybody's trying to get you to pay attention to their little, who knows, whether they're virtue signaling or if they're trying to send coded message to each other. We know there's tons of knuckleheadedry. Madonna's over there singing about fried fish. Let's all get some fried fish. Failed. The coup failed. Failed, Madonna. No fried fish for you. Democratic Party leading nominee established. Super T prior to lockdown takeover. Sanders eliminate. Biden to the front. And that's essentially what we've seen, right? Occam's razor, meaning what's the simplest solution here? Simply states that of any given set of explanations for an event occurring, the simplest one is most likely the correct one. You get the idea. Let's move on. Post 3897, 31 minutes after the hour of 6, we get a Twitter status to Representative Andy Harris. No voter ID to get a ballot? An anonymous ballot harvesting? No! Why is that hidden in Speaker Pelosi's coronavirus bill? These are issues that shouldn't be addressed at this time. Yeah, exactly. That's the very same thing I was just talking about right there. So let's read it. And we see right here, if an individual in a state is eligible to cast a vote in an election for federal office, the state may not impose any additional conditions or requirements on the eligibility of the individual to cast the vote in such election by absentee ballot, by mail, including, so we're talking about by mail, requiring any form of identification as a condition of obtaining the absentee ballot. All right, well, there it is right there, right? And Q says, prevent Democrat Party destruction by any means necessary. These people are sick. Indeed, they are. They're very sick in the head, and they all seem to be getting sick, right? Amazing how many celebrities are getting the coronavirus. Nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing's going to stop me from moving on over here to 3898. Just try to stop me. 48 minutes after the hour 6, we get this link to the Daily Caller. From March 10th, Spygate could make Watergate look like a third-rate burglary. The Spygate scandal is shaping up to be the most significant political abuse of government power in history, and it may be even larger than people expect. The investigation by U.S. Attorney John Durham into the origins of the FBI's Russian collusion investigation, or as President Trump prefers to call it, the witch hunt, continues to expand. Durham reportedly opened criminal investigations last fall, and unlike the narrow Justice Department Inspector General's review of the abuse of the FISA processes, Durham is looking into the questionable activities of other government agencies, in particular the CIA, and its former director, John, he's a brute, Brennan. The widening scope involves not only the agencies being investigated, but who was being targeted and why. Earlier last week, Cheryl Atkinson reported that, based on her sources in the intelligence and law enforcement communities, the authorizations to spy on Trump functionaries such as Carter Page or former campaign manager Paul Manafort were actually pretext for a much more expansive web of surveillance that could include anyone in contact with Page or even anyone twice removed from the ostensible target. Those were those umbrella surveillance hops that we were talking about, right? You leap from person to person, and once you get into their circle of friends, then you got to spy on their circle of friends, and it gets bigger and bigger. Hence, thousands of people could have been unknowingly caught up in the Spygate web and are still unaware that their privacy had been violated under the severely compromised FISA process. I want to stop right there because I think that's what's really key. And I've been talking about this for a very, very long time in regards to public perception of how this all works out. Let's face it, you go online and you know that at least in large part, when you were talking about people who hate Trump, they don't really think very highly of you either, right? They don't seem to care about much of this, and they don't really understand why they shouldn't care about this. They just know that they shouldn't care about this because the news tells them. However, when they realize that thousands of people were wrapped up, including Democrats, remember that FISA was to cover up this whole process, make it look legal. But this has been going on for a very, very long time, and the Obama administration knew full well about this. This was going on with half of Congress and a lot of people. And when people start realizing that it was also them that was getting targeted, now they're going to start perking their ears up and realizing why it matters. And when more and more citizens start to realize that the public figures that maybe they hold in such high esteem were also being spied on, that will start to shift their perception of how this works. And if they realize that it was them themselves, or at least there was potential that it could have been them themselves, then people start to feel different about this. And that's really part of this great awakening process and why FISA is so key. This ties into the whirlwind of unmaskings. Whirlwind during the 2016-17 transition period. Names of people inadvertently caught up in this expansive web, which ordinarily would be classified and their privacy interests protected, were revealed, and information sent to Democratic allies in Capitol Hill for safe keeping. Judicial Watch has chronicled how Obama's United Nations ambassador Samantha Power and National Security Advisor Susan Sticky Rice, among others, colluded in this effort to bolster the insurance policy to hobble the Trump presidency. There is also the matter of President Obama finalizing rules in the closing days of its administration that opened the raw, unedited information feeds collected by the NSA to all of the other 16 agencies in the intelligence community before any privacy protections are implemented. This ill-considered and unnecessary rule change vastly expanded the potential for abuse in the system and was a curious move for Obama to make in the waning days of his presidency. Okay, and this is going to be a hard sell to the public, but over time, when they can start to see this, this will be a big perception shift. I really believe so. I don't think we've quite seen that just yet. But as this starts to leak out and people realize what Obama really did in those final days and how much surveillance that really meant for everybody, they will see him in a different light. However, it makes perfect sense if you believe that Obama officials were doing their utmost to put in place a bureaucratic infrastructure seeking to undermine the Trump administration before it began. Also factor in the distrust of NSA head Admiral Mike Rogers, who met with President-elect Trump in November of 2016 and allegedly blew the whistle on the Trump Tower wiretapping. Also remember that the very next day, they moved off to Jay-Z, and Brennan and Clapper were calling for Admiral Mike Rogers' head just 48 hours later. Essentially, Obama's rule change took Rogers out of the equation and gave other agency heads like Brennan and former DNI James Clapper the freedom to spread around whatever information the NSA was scooping up, whether relevant to Russia or not. And what did those two guys do with it? They went to CNN. Thus, the people peripheral to Donald Trump, who were the initial targets, served principally as gateways to justify a massive domestic spying operation. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the key. Q says the key that opens all doors. And Q has long said that FISA is the start. So that is why so many of these Q posts, if you go back, and if you're new to Q and you go back over some of these older videos, which I highly suggest you do, educate yourself on how FISA abuse work. We've talked extensively. As a matter of fact, we have talked about till I'm blue in the face about it. But there is such an importance on this because when you are talking to your friends, you're educating your friends. It's real easy to tell your friends, well, they're all Satanist pedophiles and they're doing It's not a real easy elevator pitch, right? But when you show them that you really understand FISA abuse, how it worked and how this was all directed from the top, and you can break it down for them and show it to them, then that's when you can really start to sway people. And not just in your personal conversations, but of course on the news and things like that. But they have to see why it affects them. And when they realize that this essentially was an implementation of a surveillance state on them, then of course that starts to make them feel a little bit different about things. And that's when we'll really see the start, or at least FISA being the actual start of that process. All right, Patriots, that's all I got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. And I want to let you know that I'm going to be taking a few more days to try and get this project out. It may not take that long, but it depends on whether or not Q posts. So if Q posts, I will get on that likely. But if not, just know that I will be putting my bum to work on a couple of other projects that I'd really like to get out by the end of the month, if at all possible. So be on the lookout for that. All my alternate links are down below if you're on YouTube, to my Gab, my BitChute, my DropSpace, and my Brighteon, and I don't remember. It's all down below. My email is down below. If you've got information to share with me, please do not DM me on Twitter. I don't respond to those. Just email me, which is linked down below. My P.O. box is down below. Thanks to all of you who've been sending the gifts. I really, really appreciate it. You guys are so kind and a lot of fun. And my Patreon is down below if you'd like to support the channel. It's all down below, and I'll see you next time. This is Sir Patrick Mack. Stay funky, and let's all eat some fried fish.